on this morning's Ag Issues program. A pleasure, as always, to bring onto the program, and you hear him every couple of weeks on the program itself. Roger McEowen, professor of agricultural law and taxation at the Washburn University School of Law, as he joins us on the program this morning. Roger, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Greg. Just fine, thank you.
All right, let's get into it. One of the things we're going to talk about, or leading off this morning, is the emergency relief program. But specifically, like any other program itself, there are certain thresholds, certain things that need to be met. But this case, though, with the emergency relief program from USDA, it is what the definition is of farm income and some other aspects of the program.
Yeah, Greg, I was listening to your farm news update the last half hour, and you quoted or somebody talking from USDA talking about ERP and touting how helpful this will be to farmers. Well, I have to tell you that some of us in the tax world have been fighting a battle with USDA in Washington, D.C. to get a definition of farm income such that it won't wipe out a bunch of farmers, including Kansas farmers, from qualifying. Well, they refused to listen to us, and so we're going to have to go probably the congressional route with legislation to get this definition changed. But let me give a little background here to explain what I'm talking about. The payment limit for ERP, the general payment limit is $125,000, and for specialty crops, it is $125,000. For everything else, it's $125,000 combined. But an applicant, and this is the key, for an applicant that has average farm adjusted gross income, and that's the term that is used, so average AGI, based on the immediate first year back, that is comprised of more than 75% from farming activities, then the normally applicable $900,000 adjusted gross income limit to be able to participate in farm programs is dropped, and then the payment limit goes $1,000 for specialty crops. We don't worry about that one too much in Kansas. And it goes to $250,000 for all other crops, such as wheat and soybeans and corn. So basically, you get a doubling of your payment limit if more than 75% of your income comes from farming activities. Now, the definition of farm income is the key. And it's not what we think from an accounting standpoint. FSA has their own definition. We in the tax world have the code definition. But for ERP purposes, it's net Schedule F income, your pass-through income from farming activities, wages from a farming entity, IT disc income that is materially participating in farming, and that's defined as the entity having a majority of gross receipts from farming. And gross receipts is defined in the tax code sense. So they're all over the board on this. Also, counting as farm income for ERP purposes is income from packing, storing, processing, transporting, shedding of farm products. And so that's an important one. But here's the key. Gains from the sale of farm equipment count, but only if farm income is at least two-thirds of overall AGI, excluding gains from equipment sales and the sale of farm inputs. So you can't count your gains from equipment sales and sale of farm inputs in that two-thirds of overall AGI limitation. Now, here's the problem. Under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which took effective for tax years beginning after 2017, when you trade in farm equipment, it's treated as a sale that's reported on Form 4797. It does not go on the Schedule F. And so, as a result of that, many farmers are going to have little income reported on Schedule F for a tax year that they incurred a large gain from trading in farm equipment, because that's getting reported on Form 4797. That is what is going to cause a farmer to not receive an additional ERP payment. So we could have a lot of farmers, because of disasters, because of drought, say in western Kansas, that based on their crop insurance, they would be entitled to, say, $400,000 of payments. Theoretically, they should be eligible. All their income is coming from farming. They should be eligible for that additional payment limit. But they won't be if they are not routing that income through a Schedule F because of the way that so-called trade-ins of farm equipment are treated, which doesn't go through Schedule F. We have tried and tried for the past 2 months to persuade USDA that their definition here is wrong, it's unfair, they're not accounting for the change in the tax code that went into effect starting in 2018, and they need to include those equipment gains. And I think it's likely, although they didn't specify this in their handbook, it's likely the same rule is going to apply to custom farming or harvesting services, as well as income derived from providing feed to farmers. Now, you can offset by allocated expenses in that situation, but this income from equipment gains issue is a big issue, and we're already talking to Senator Grassley in Iowa and others to get that changed because FSA put their foot down last week and wouldn't change their definition to account for equipment gains.
So change legislatively, would that have to be done in this session of Congress?
Well, it has to be done at any point in time. The sooner that it's done, the sooner we get the rule changed. Because my experience on this the past couple of months is that the state offices clearly understand the problem. The problem is in Washington, D.C. with the national office of FSA. They just will not back down from this definition. So, we got some good change out of them with respect, or good clarification, let me put it that way, with respect to net operating losses. But this issue on equipment gains needs to change, just simply to reflect the change in the tax code under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act as the way we treat trade-in of farm equipment.
Definition of farm income, as we mentioned, one part of that. But by the way, this post will be up soon, up on your website. But obviously, you talk about drought. You got to talk about for livestock producers. But obviously here in Kansas, but you can go Oklahoma, you can go Texas, and other areas as well.
Yeah, and there is the livestock relief program, too. And to get a Phase 1 payment, a livestock producer has to have suffered grazing losses in a county that's rated as having a severe drought. You look to the U.S. Drought Monitor maps for that, for at least 8 consecutive weeks, or at least have extreme drought during 2021. And 2020 and 2021 are our measuring years here, even though the payments are starting in 2022, which means, by the way, if a producer gets an ERP payment, it is not deferrable. Hopefully that will fend off a whole more questions that I get on that. I probably get 5 to 10 of those questions every day. Are these payments deferrable? They're coming from all over the country. No, they're not, because these are for years to 2020 and 2021. If you receive them this year or next, it's already been deferred, so you can't defer them again. So no, those payments are not deferrable. So if you normally also out west, there are some rules that apply if you're grazing on federal land too. So there's a lot of stuff out here. It's absolutely critical that FSA get this income definition right.
What about concerning crop insurance?
Well, you have to have crop insurance, get an ERP payment, and that's the key to all of this. And this is, of course, what ERP is simply the retooled WIP Plus program. That's they took WIP Plus and retooled it and renamed it the ERP. And you're going to have 2 phases to the payments. We're in Phase 1. Phase 2 probably won't happen until 2023, but we'll know more of that as they get more information out probably next month. And the payments can be made to a producer that has a crop that's eligible for crop insurance or non-insurance crop disaster assistance, the NAP payments, that is subject to a qualifying disaster, which is a very broad definition to what that is, and received a payment. So droughts are the big one, but you've got wildfire and all other types of things. But crop insurance is a prerequisite to being able to get or having a crop eligible for crop insurance that is subject to a qualifying disaster and received a payment is the eligibility requirements, the background basic eligibility requirements for getting an ERP payment.
Roger McEowen, Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation at the Washburn University School of Law, is joining us. And Roger, the recently signed bill, as you have put it, recent tax, climate, and health care bill, there's a couple of things you want to focus on this morning. Let's first talk about the extension of the excess business loss rule?
In that bill, which I refuse to call by its actual title, I'll probably refer to it by bill number, because if there's ever been a misnamed bill or misleading bill in terms of its name, it's this one. This is not going. You can't deficit spend your way into inflation reduction, which this purports to do. And I've noticed that the politicians now in the media are not even referring to it as the inflation reduction bill. So it's been renamed now that it's passed. But a couple of things in there that I want to focus on from a tax standpoint, important to farmers and ranchers, is that they've got a cap that they've continued that was going to come off after 2026. Now it won't come off until after 2028 on your ability to deduct net operating losses from your farming operation by keeping in the excess business loss limitation that was put in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was to expire, and now it expire at the end of TCJA. Now it's got a 2-year extension on it. So what this does is, if you have net operating losses in your farming operation, that's going to be capped at $250,000 on a single return, $500,000 on a married filing joint return. Now those are a little bit higher right now because those have been adjusted for inflation. I think it's about 528 now on the inflation adjustment, but that cap stays on. And so if you've got kind of tough times in agriculture, you experience a net operating loss, you may not be able to fully deduct that loss. The other one that's in here that people need to pay attention to, not only did they pour a bunch of money, $80 billion into IRS funding, and basically allowing IRS to double its size with the hiring of up to 87,000 new agents, they gave IRS a 10-year statute of limitations to review returns on which a taxpayer has received a PPP loan or a Small Business Administration EIDL loan, the economic disaster loans. So if you've taken one of those, your return is going to be open for review, not just for 3 years, but for 10 years. And so we need to be aware of that. So when I see these two things, dramatic increase in IRS funding, coupled with a longer statute of limitations on PPP and EIDL loans, that tells me exactly what they're going to be looking at. That's one of the major things they're going to be looking at. So if you're a farming operation, farming business, any type of small business, you got a PPP loan or one of these EIDL loans, yeah, they're going to look at that.
And I know you're going to post this, a more detailed piece, later in the week, but what are some of the other things, if people are looking at, that they should highlight or know that is in there?
Well, the tax increase on the minimum corporate tax, the alternative minimum corporate tax, that's going to hit manufacturing hard, and I'll go through the analysis of the incidence of that tax. One other thing that really bothers me that I think our farmers and ranchers need to be aware of is that they put $3 billion in this that's to be allocated for the EPA to oversee block grants for environmental justice, with the administrator getting to define what environmental justice is. And environmental justice in and of itself gets about $60 billion. And the way they define that in the statute is to facilitate engagement of disadvantaged communities in state and federal advisory groups, workshops, rulemakings, and other public processes, end quote. That's an open invitation, carte blanche for EPA to do a lot of stuff I'm not sure that we want them to be doing from a farm and ranch perspective. And the EPA alone, it's more than $40 billion, and including more than $30 billion for disadvantaged communities, with, again, the administrator getting to define what disadvantage is. I don't like to see that rat's nest getting opened up with EPA, and that's a dramatic increase in their budget. And also $25 million to Government Accountability Office to determine whether the economic, social, and environmental impacts of the funds described in this paragraph are equitable, end quote. Define that for me. Well, the bureaucrats get to define this, and that's an open invitation to do a lot of stuff there by federal bureaucrats. And I could go on, but I'm working on a piece. I hope to have this one out Thursday that kind of details, of course, all the conservation programs, the funding of the conservation programs, which we care about in ag, but then all this other stuff that's in there too, that's lesser known, but it's there, and I think we have to be concerned about exactly what is the federal government going to be doing with all of these funds.
And one final thing, and I know obviously you keep very busy, but you've got a big Kansas fence law seminar that is taking place tomorrow in Junction City.
Yeah, I'm actually in Kansas this week. I've been on the road, Colorado and Washington, state of Washington, and up in North Dakota last week. But I'm here this week to do a fence seminar over in Junction City. We currently have over 500 people that are registered for this. It's also online. People are attending from over 12 states. This is also kind of the send-off for one of the really great ag county agents in Kansas that's been here a long time, Chuck Oddie, who's retiring in just a couple of weeks, and he's had a fabulous career, and I know a lot of people really appreciate him. So turn out to say thanks to Chuck, and hopefully we can learn a couple things about fence law at that meeting. That'll be 7:00 Tuesday night at the Geary County 4-H Senior Citizens Building, just on the west side of Junction City.
And they can call the Geary County Extension Office or email Chuck if they want to attend, not only in person, but virtually as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's true. And it's also posted Ag Manager website at K-State.
All right, sounds good. And Roger, by the way, we talked about you're going to be posting these articles. Where can they find those?
I'll have the one ERP program posted on my agricultural law and taxation blog, which you can access off the homepage of my website, which is washburnlaw.edu/Walter, WALTR. I'll post that tomorrow. I just posted one yesterday afternoon on part 2 of a series that I did on LLCs and self-employment tax. I'll give it a rest today, put this article up tomorrow. It may add in another example if I have time today before I post it. And then on Thursday, my plan is Thursday or Friday to post the detailed one on the big piece of legislation that recently passed.
All right, sounds good. Roger, as always, a pleasure. Appreciate it, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Greg.
That is Roger McEowen, Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation at the Washburn University School of Law, as he joins us on the Ag Issues program here on 580 WIBW.